do have a quorum of 5 people. I know, appreciate everybody's time. So we will just start this meeting. And I would like to call to order the Town of Cohasset Sidewalk Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, April 25th at 11:35. In attendance this evening, we have 5 committee members, which does make a quorum of our 9 members. We have Julie Rollins. Actually, when I just say your name, please just say aye, just for the record here. Julie Rollins.
Aye.
Jay Pampari, present. Tori Hanna. Hi, Tori, you're muted, but that's okay. I can read lips.
Sorry, I'm here.
Frank Cicchetti.
Present.
And Ralph Dormitzer.
Present.
Hi, Ralph. Thank you, everybody, for calling in. Brenda Douglas, is that Brenda or is it somebody else from the town? She's unmuted, but anyway.
Yeah.
I know that Bill Burnett and Bob couldn't make it today, and Paul was going to be tied up. So any event, I'm hoping that Brian Joyce is able to call in. So hope everybody had a nice little break. Back to business here with the sidewalks and the roadways. Hopefully, again, everybody had an opportunity to read over the paving report and or the sidewalk report that was circulated out. I wanted to spend a little bit of time today, or most of the time, really going over a setting of the criteria for the sidewalks and the roadways. But before we get started, if you look at the agenda, normally we have topics not reasonably expected within 48 hours at the bottom of the agenda. But I found being on certain committees that people wait till the end of the meeting and you think the meeting's over and they say, oh, something just came up yesterday that I wanted to bring up. And it's like, I thought we were going home for the night. So anyway, I brought that to the forefront. I see someone else has joined us. Oh, someone's trying to call in on 781. I brought that to the forefront just to bring that issue up. If there's anything that's not on the agenda that you wanted to talk about, please bring up that topic right now and we will make sure that we hit it. So are there any topics not reasonably anticipated within 48 hours?
Well, the one I would bring up, if I may, Justin, would be sort of closing off the Elm Street one or deciding how that one's going to be closed off. That's the big question, right?
Okay.
That could be a Brian Joyce question as much as anything, but it really involves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you. And so we'll circle back to that. I see Tracy, I see the 781-635-8771. Someone's calling in.
Brian's getting in. He just texted me. And this Brenda Douglas is actually Carol. So I'm going to rename her. So
okay. All right. Hi, Carol. And so our next item of business is the election of the secretaries we were briefly speaking about a few minutes ago. We have confirmed, I see that Carol Rowe is going to be taking the notes for these meetings for this particular committee. So I thank you in advance, Carol. So the role of the secretary is really, it's not a big heavy lift here, in my view. It's just to make sure that the agenda is posted within 48 hours of the actual meeting and that the minutes are generated in a timely manner and the minutes are circulated to the committee. So with that, I know we had a couple of nominations last week. I will entertain nominations at this point for secretary, if anybody would like to nominate anybody for secretary. Not hearing any. I would like to nominate Julie Rollins for secretary. Do I have a second? Wait, is there a second?
Second.
Julie, would you, are there any other nominations?
I'm just wondering if Tori Hanna would be interested. I don't want to take it if Tori's interested because I did offer it to Tori last time.
Julie, I would love for you to take this honor.
All right, I accept.
All right. Well, thank you. Not hearing any other nominations, we'll just, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? That vote passes 5-0. Thank you, Julie. Okay. Next item of business is what I had put down on the schedule here is the update of upcoming. Hi, Brian. Can we promote or unmute Brian so he can speak on the phone, Tracy? I don't know, as an attendee, he probably doesn't have the capability to
Yeah,
speak. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Great. Oh,
Brian,
thanks,
you there?
Brian, can you hear us? I think you're still muted. All right. Can you hear us, Brian? All right, we'll circle back. Okay, so hopefully everybody had a nice break and had an opportunity to look over those two reports. And I found, I read them quite a bit. I have my own personal comments, which I'll relay in a few minutes. We had the paving plan. We had the sidewalk report. Actually, let me try and do a little screen share here. This always helps. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody should have, hopefully you've read through this. This was the report that was created or prepared for the town by TEC back in November. And it goes through all of the recommendations, etc. And I found this report very extremely useful. This is the sidewalk, talks a lot about ADA compliance, etc. And what I also found interesting is the actual rating. So what I wanted to do is kind of brainstorm and talk about setting of the criteria. I think that this committee, one of our tasks is to come up with, if we're going to move forward, how are we prioritizing these sidewalks? And we have to have some type of criteria in order to do that. And if you look at the ratings here, I think this first one here, that's the, looks to me, I think that's the sidewalk to nowhere on Sawyer Street. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody thinks it's somewhere else. You notice that the sidewalk is actually it's actually a pervious sidewalk or asphalt in order that water can actually filter through that. The sidewalk was along the side of of a bordering vegetated wetland on the side there. So there was some wetlands issues, but nevertheless, it's a beautiful looking sidewalk. I've never seen anybody on that sidewalk in the past 6 months or years since it's put in, but it is a beautiful looking sidewalk. And then you comes down to a rating of 4. We have a likely ADA compliant, etc. And then you have, which is in a lot of part of towns, you have areas where the trees and the roots, etc., go into the sidewalk and faulty cracks. And then you have other side. This is over by the harbor. I think this is Margin Street where the harbor condos are going in. And you have, what's not a great sidewalk, but not a bad sidewalk compared to a lot of sidewalks in town. And then you have the little to no accessibility number 1, and then you kind of come down to no existing sidewalks along the roadway here where it would be great to have a sidewalk. So with that, I just wanted to go back and talk a little bit about what people think the criteria should be for the sidewalk. And I'll start this brainstorm event here and just throw one of them out there. And Carol, if you could start to take notes on some of these, I imagine we'll probably come up with about a handful, maybe 10, maybe even more. And then I think what would be good to focus it down to actually finalize 3 to 5 criteria. But certainly if we brainstorm, we'll come up with more than that. But one of the low hanging fruit here is a proximity to schools, right? Okay, proximity to schools. I see a couple people shaking their head. That was my number 1 criteria. And so Carol, if you could start taking those, that would be my number 1. I'll stop there. I'll let other people chime in. And if they want to give a little explanation or a little background about, what your criteria for prioritization of these sidewalks would be.
Jay, when we talk about like proximity to schools, are we thinking like a 1 mile radius? Like, I think we should probably get a little detailed in terms of what we mean by proximity, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Maybe also, it's a good point, Tori, maybe the proximity / connectivity to schools,
Mhm.
as far as connectivity to the schools, because obviously there's there's King Street that's out there that you have to cross 3A to get there, but if you could cross 3A, then it would connect you to the school.
Yeah.
So maybe connectivity, proximity / connectivity to schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think if we can somehow quantify the number of residents or constituents served per dollar spent, like the sidewalk to nowhere, the biggest problem is that it goes out to 3 and it doesn't connect to anybody. So it's not that it's a waste of money. It's a very nice sidewalk, and if it connects to Avalon, then it would connect to a lot of people. But look at each piece of sidewalk that we're considering and think about how many residents would access that, right? And then would it connect to things like the schools? We have an existing network of sidewalks. I think there's some places in there where we can build just a tiny amount of sidewalk that would then connect to another small network of sidewalks. Like if the town is a hub with the points of interest being the schools, the town center, the parks and things, get those connected. That's the hub of the wheel, and then some spokes that go out to connect to other larger neighborhoods that would then connect to that. And I think for prioritization, just quantifying the people served per dollar spent, so we don't end up with more sidewalks than nowhere.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And is there another area of town that would be served as well? I know with proximity to schools and Cohasset, we have 2 schools, right? Well, 2 school areas. We've got the high school, then we've got the Osgood and Deer Hill, and beyond that, that's really it. So is there another area or like downtown that we want to bring in connectivity to downtown area?
Yeah, I think the town and the harbor
Yeah.
should be at library up there as well. Like if you look at the points of interest in the town schools, I think number 1, that's a great one. The harbor and the town, the town center itself being, South and North Main Street where they come together. The library,
Okay.
I already said that. Then and certain parts. So if those are connected themselves, then once you get a neighborhood connected to any one of those points of interest, then they're automatically connected to the others.
So is it safe to say town center? I kind of like that word without saying like, that really encompasses downtown, the library,
The harbor.
throw the harbor in there because there's only one way to get there, back and forth Elm Street, and then, the other road coming in. But so we say connectivity to town center.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. I had another one here, and then although it's like population served, it with respect to like runners, walkers, families with children, etc. And I know I live down the end of Jerusalem Road by the church, and a miracle if you go out at 6 o'clock in the morning and see the amount of people that are actually walking and running, or even at any point of the day. But it's incredible how many people actually walk the roads during the day. So I try to come up with something catchy. I don't know if it fits the bill, but it's just basically a large population of recreational use.
Yeah.
Recreational use, not only being, I don't want people to think like bike paths, etc., because there's a lot of people on Saturday and Sunday mornings that don't live in Cohasset that come and ride their bikes from many other towns, but it's like recreational / family use and walkers, strollers, etc.
Jay, I think the one caveat I would say to that is like there are people like Jerusalem gets a lot, right, of traffic and stuff. I also wonder is how many people aren't using some of the streets that they would use if it were safe, so like and living on King Street, I can use that as an example, is I think like I've seen a lot of people using it. And then I've also seen people like, I'm not risking my life on that one again,
Yeah.
So I think it's like, as we go through that and make that as one of the criteria, it's like, I think the further question beyond that is like, how many people would use it if it were safe?
Okay.
And Jerusalem, I think, would obviously be used a lot more if it were safe,
Yeah. Well, I'm going to show you something that I share my screen here in a second. So I reached out to the town because a couple years ago, I don't know if many people you've seen this, I saw the bus routes. And the amount of children that are waiting at the bus on some of these stops in the morning is incredible. You have 20 to 30 kids, and I don't say kids, children, school-age children, anywhere from 5 to 8 to 12. You know, try and keep them in a little huddle, you know, on a beautiful day like this morning, without throwing the ball around, kicking the ball around, or jumping on a rock wall or something. So I try to reach out to the town. I didn't have the latest map, but I have the map here of the bus routes. And I wanted to share this with you. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of areas that really kind of stood out. So I think there are 6 or 7 bus routes. This was,
I think we might be up to 9 now.
are we up to 9? Okay, so again, this
Yeah.
was the FY 2022. They didn't have one for FY 2023, so this is the one I'm going off.
Okay.
So just looking at like Linden Drive is like a little mini town in itself.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
have 9 and 17 students getting on. You've got 37 kids getting off and 46. So add that up, you've got 83, potentially 83 students on that bus.
Mhm.
So, you know, then you come down to, which was also.
Where do they all
along-
sit on the bus is the question.
Well, I don't know. Assuming they all get there the same day. You know, again, you know, Howe Road and Jerusalem Road, 14 kids, and then Jerusalem Road, Windy Hill Road, 32 kids, and then Black Rock. So
Yeah.
you've got 40 kids get on the bus within about a 400-yard stretch.
Yeah.
And so, you know, these, and self-disclosure, I live on one of these bus stops. But, you know, just looking at some of the others, so we start to look at like Pleasant Street, Cushing, 777. I think that this graph is worthwhile looking at. And again, Beechwood and Doane, you know, 16 kids getting on. And this is just the elementary. This isn't the high school. This is just the
Yeah.
elementary bus. So, you know, 11 kids at King Street in Whitney Woods Lane. And so I think that we should look into this a little bit more as we start to get out into this prioritization. Beechwood and Walnut, 31 kids. You know, so 31 kids are standing around. I don't know where they're standing around. I don't know the sidewalk situation over there, but I think there should be some type of comparison with prioritization moving along as well. And Forest Ave is fully
Yeah.
sidewalk, so it's not a bad thing. You know, here, Fair Oaks and well, that's all sidewalk now, so you don't have to worry about it. Surprisingly, so there's only 12 students at Avalon. And people think of all the kids up at Avalon, at least in FY 2022, last year, only 12 kids got on the bus at Avalon. There are many other stops along the way. So again, I wanted to share that with you.
That's a really good point. I
Yeah.
didn't know that about Avalon. So Jay, are you suggesting, and this is something that I've been thinking about, is if there are a relatively high number of children waiting for a bus, they really should be waiting on a sidewalk?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, how do we capture that in 7 words or less?
Well, I do wonder too if like visually some things might strike home for people, like the stop with 37 kids getting on one morning, if we can snap a picture of what that actually looks like. Because you make a great point. Like they're not just standing there waiting patiently for a bus.
Yeah.
Like we all know that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a point well taken, and something too is like the cars. All the cars are flying at that time of day because they're also trying to get to work or to get to the train or whatever else. So it's not like they're leisurely on a drive.
Yeah. And where do the kids wait when they're waiting for the bus? You know, if you see the bus coming, all right, everybody on the sidewalk. So
Yeah.
again, you know, how do we capture that with a 1 or 2 sentences? Because again, they need like a catchy phrase here when you think of criteria for our final report or
message to the select board, or again, prioritization. How, you know, what's the catchy phrase here? Child safety at bus stops.
Yeah.
I like that.
Prioritizing child safety at bus stops.
Carol,
I mean-
child safety at bus stops.
I have another possible brainstorming item for us to consider, and that is that for any road that it should, maybe we could consider speed limit on the road. So for any road that is 30 miles per hour, that we would prioritize a sidewalk on that road because the cars are traveling so quickly. On the roads where the speeds are reduced to 20 or 25, of course, those streets are important too, but I think the roads where people are driving over 30, because we know when the limit's 30, they're definitely going higher than that. On those roads, I would recommend that we consider prioritizing those roads.
So like a speed limit safety measure?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Ralph, you're awfully quiet over there. I know you've got about, you've got 5 of them on the tip of your tongue. I know you do.
Anyway, a few that I would think about. One is the recreation one. And what I see in the summer is at the sailing club and at the yacht club, huge numbers of kids, all coming and going, pretty much at the same time. So I would certainly prioritize that, because we do know of all the large clusters of kids, I don't know of any larger cluster than those kids who are coming from either one of those two venues. So I would certainly put those in. In a very different vein, also, I would say that this isn't about so much prioritizing the roads, but what in fact do you intend to do for those roads that you intend to prioritize? And I think Brian Joyce would probably agree with me on this, but basically, why don't we just say we want to actually overlay every sidewalk which exists and is in some form of trouble on any major road whenever we pave the road? Now, that doesn't sound like a criteria exactly, but it's a practical suggestion, because we actually then get at many of the roads that in fact will be paved, and then simultaneously we want to do simultaneously want to do the sidewalks. And often it's just an overlay, and maybe some is more extensive at other times. But nevertheless, when you do one, you'd like to do the other as well. So anyway, those are 2 things I can think of right away off the top of my head. And the third one in terms of recreation would certainly be Sandy Beach, where you in fact want to have the ability to walk to Sandy Beach from many different spots, whether it's the town or whether it's somebody on Nichols Road, for example, or a portion of Jerusalem Road, where people do actually want to walk to get there. So I'm looking about recreation areas where lots and lots of people want to walk rather than drive. So those are my ones. Yeah.
No, that's a good point, Ralph. You know, just to get into the detail about like Sandy Beach as well. There are obviously there are some areas there where there's a cost factor to that, and there's a geography factor to that. And Brian, you know, some like Beach Street. I mean, no matter, I was driving down Beach Street, and there's like when you come off of, I guess you come off of Atlantic and take either a left or a right onto Beach, and you go up, and it's one of the first bends there. We have to go left, and there's that giant outcrop of ledge that I'm surprised isn't painted every color in the world from every fender in Cohasset or sidewall that hasn't hit that giant rock. So you look at that area and you go, well, that would be a wonderful place to put a sidewalk, but there's just physically, it's impossible to get a sidewalk in there, in my view, and in certain parts of the roadway. So I think it's like reality as well about what's realistic at the end of the day. Yeah, what's realistic and with respect to physically getting it in, and then a cost factor which goes along with that. But I mean,
Jay, I agree. And Ralph, I wanted to say I agree wholeheartedly with your points.
Yeah.
Same.
You know, there are some bends there. It's between the Cunningham Bridge and Sandy Beach. You're taking your life in your own hands by walking or biking, or and down by the end of Black Rock Beach as well, where the road kind of comes in there. There are certain parts of town that you have to look left and look right and you have to walk for about 100 yards. You have to look left and right the whole time, or because a car could come flying around the corner at any moment in time. So how do we capture that, Ralph, in a few words when we go back to recreational? I think, you was we were
Yeah,
stuck on
it's-
recreation.
Okay, but unfortunately, you have to qualify it so much. But anyway, it is a radius from each of those places, whether it's the yacht club or the or Sandy Beach. You have to sort of say, hey, there's a radius which is reasonable that people would actually use, because it may not be a mile. Quite frankly, it may be less than a mile, but it is a radius of some sort. So you have to qualify it. That's all.
Okay. No, I get it. So I think we've got about 6 or 7 here, but I want to keep going. And again, it's just today's just really a brainstorming event. I don't expect to finalize anything today, but other than just brainstorm about these, and then at the next meeting, kind of maybe focus in on them and narrow into on our 3 or 4 that we come up with.
Jay, I mean, I think that the two obviously headliners are safety and connectivity, right? Like that's the two headliners. And then underneath that, I think the priority, it sounds like, is school, right? And whether we lump the school bus thing in with that, connectivity and safety to the school. And then recreation obviously is, would come right after that, I would think. And I think like town connectivity, right? Like when in that master plan doc, connectivity was the biggest thing. Well, safety was, and then connectivity and stuff. So I think all of this fits right in that. And to Ralph's point, it's just identifying what are those other ones. So like we said, the town center, however, and harbor, I think we included in that, but maybe we specifically call out the sailing club and the and Sandy Beach, and maybe even throwing in Whitney Thayer Woods as one too. That sidewalk to nowhere, like let's make it not go to nowhere. Let's connect it in there.
Yeah.
Yep.
The only other missing one out of all of this, I think, and for all of our friends on Beechwood Street, even though I think the Beechwood Ballpark at this point is not terribly well used, nevertheless, that will become a recreation area, I think, based on what is going to be planned for that whole area. So I think you've got to put Beechwood Ballpark as also a place where you might have a radius from there where people would want to walk to get there. So that's the other one.
Yeah, I think for sure, like with Doan Street there, and then obviously the general store coming in and all that.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think Milliken too, with the tennis courts and the fields there, it's almost connected, but not completely. There's like 30 yards at the end of Norfolk, I think, at the top of Norfolk, where there isn't a sidewalk. So you almost get there from town, you almost get there from the hillside neighborhood. And then I think 2 properties or 1.5 properties from the top, the sidewalk just disappears and you spill out of the street, and then you're in the parking lot there, the row parking. So I think that's low hanging fruit where they, for 30 yards of sidewalk, that's all of a sudden connected to the town.
I think I'll give you the other one, that you raised, which is really kind of interesting. We see this all the time, and that is there's a sidewalk which terminates at the high school before it reaches Pond Street. There's this little extension which has never been completed. Now that's a very concrete suggestion, but nevertheless, it seems kind of obvious now. If we're going to do it, we extend that sidewalk from roughly where the entry to the parking lot is down to Pond Street. I think that was the other obvious one to do.
Yeah.
Well, and then that Pond Street to 3A, all of a sudden it ends too.
And it's very sudden. The kids are forced to cross a crosswalk. They have a little bit of sidewalk and then it just ends. Right now we have 10 or 15 kids walking home from the high school and the middle school and, taking their lives in their hands, crossing 3A. But for a lot of that, they're not on a sidewalk.
Yeah, right.
So how about, go ahead, Julie, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that to Tori's point, connecting one half of town to the other half of town, I think resonates for me. So it's not just about connectivity to school, but it's also connecting this half of town with the Beechwood, the King Street, the Whitney Fair for recreation, but that whole entire half of town with the other half of town, so that folks in the in-town area can easily access this half of town, which is beautiful, where we have Lily Pond and we have Whitney Fair. We have a lot going on over here, but people can't easily access it because, again, no sidewalk. And for us on this half of town to be able to access town and access the harbor, that would be really wonderful if we could safely. Otherwise, what happens now is everyone's driving. So everyone has to jump in their car and drive half a mile down the street to get to the sailing club, to get to Sandy Beach, to get to all of these things that we could ordinarily walk to. And that adds to traffic congestion in town, which I know is another issue, parking and traffic in town. And if we could reduce the number of cars on the road, increase physical activity, increase recreation, cut down on cars, I think it would benefit everybody, including everyone who lives in the town and wants less cars there.
So that's I'm trying to capture this, and again, like in one sentence for Carol and for everybody, it's almost like increasing connectivity townwide, and eliminating the sidewalks to nowhere, or connecting the sidewalks to nowhere with another sidewalk. So connectivity townwide.
Cross 3A connectivity or something?
3A, yeah, that's right, Frank. I like the idea of mentioning 3A because it bifurcates our town right now in half. And it just sets up this physical and natural barrier between the two halves of town that it would be great to abolish that. It would be great to get rid of that physical barrier between the two halves of town, and to call out 3A specifically, I think, Frank, is a great idea.
Is there a push button light at Pond Street in 3A?
Yes, there
Yes.
is.
Oh,
There is, and I've been working with Senator O'Connor's office to improve it. So
okay.
I wrote a letter to them because what happened was I was nearly killed at that intersection with my twins because they did not shut down all 4 directions of traffic when the walk signal was ignited. So what happens is people are trying to turn when people are crossing. And there's a lot of people who run that light too. So they did manage to make that change. They have now shut down the traffic going in all 4 directions when sometimes crossing.
Okay.
I did ask them.
But you better be quick, Ralph, to cross that street.
Because we timed it, Tori and I've timed it. It's so quick. And they said that they extended it, but they did not extend it. So Tori and I need to get back to them and about that. And then the other piece is the lines, the physical lines on the road. We did ask for them to repaint it. And to their credit, they repainted them last week and they look great, but they're also very feeble. The lines are feeble as it is. What I think we're looking for because of so many children who cross at that intersection, and residents in this half of town who access the other side of town that way. So for all the adults who would like to walk there, there isn't really a proper crosswalk. They're very skinny little lines. And it would be nice to have a zebra painted line there, which really communicates to drivers, this is where people are walking. And right now it's not a very robust area for walkers. It's sort of like, this is a state highway and good luck to you if you want to try to cross it. And there are a lot of children who are trying to cross that now. And I'd love for my children to be able to cross it, but I don't trust it now because, again, and one other issue with the timing of the lights is when one goes red, the other one goes green instantaneously. So if somebody's running the red light, there's an accident. We nearly had really serious accidents because the timing is still off. So I have more work to do there with Senator Connor's office, and I plan to do that this spring. But beefing up that intersection, making it safe for all residents is a priority, at least for me. And I'd love it if we could keep talking.
Yeah, no, that's great. Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot here for a minute. I know we jumped over you at the beginning because there's been a lot of discussion about this Pond Street, and if I remember correctly from the last meeting, that area was being where is that? Where is Pond Street? That extension there on the list for paving / sidewalk, or is it on the list?
I think it's in the list in the, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think it's in the next 2 years following this paving year.
Is it on the roadway paving plan?
Yeah, I think it was listed as, it's on the Cohasset 10-year paving plan. I think it was listed as Pond Street Extension.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Can you see my screen here?
Yeah, I see it. So yeah, it would be right now it's on next year's list. And again, the list is, it's fungible, it changes based on condition. And
well, let me ask you this. Let's jump to 2023 to kind of shift gears a little bit, getting away from the criteria and respecting everybody's time here, and jump back to an agenda item we had a little earlier. I see the 2023 list. We've got Mill Lane, Smith Place, Cushing Road, Atlantic Ave, Margin Street, Elm Street, Beechwood. Which of these, I guess 7 are 100% definitely going to be done in your view for this summer or spring or 2023?
So Beechwood Street is getting a water main right now. We like to wait at least 3 months for settlement. So the hope
Yeah.
was that that would be in the fall, but of any of these ones to get pushed out, that one might push to the spring. So we have, winter settlement, we're not paving, and we get settlement after the fact. Margin Street, Smith Place, and that, Mill Lane and Cushing Road is really just a small piece of Cushing Road from Smith Place to Pleasant Street. Atlantic Avenue, again, that's contiguous with Margin Street. So it's, when I say Smith Place, Cushing Road, that's one paving project. Atlantic Avenue, Margin Street, that's one paving project. Elm Street, we need to make the decision, we need to finalize that design. So I would say all of them are on the list for this year. Mill Lane, just by virtue of proximity to Beechwood Street, if Beechwood gets pushed to the spring of next year, then Mill Lane will probably go with that. And that's kind of where we stand. We're also doing paving that's not in here, but in the cemeteries. I mean, it's kind of out of what you guys are talking about.
Is there a chance? Can I ask you a quick question? I'm sorry.
No, you're good, Ralph. We might be asking the same thing, so.
Okay, I was going to ask about, okay, can we do that Pond Street extension from 3A to King Street is what I would ask.
Yes, that's right.
I'd like to see
So, I
that.
mean, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, like the intent, and I think there's a lot of interest in maybe adding a sidewalk there, and that sidewalk would take design, and you see the wetlands are right on the edge of the road, so it would take some design and permitting. And I think doing that this summer, we could do it in its current configuration, provided we have enough funding, but we wouldn't be adding a sidewalk and doing the things that I think, if what I'm hearing is what people want out there.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of deserves it as well,
Yeah.
I will say that, so 3A is obviously a DOT project. We don't have any ability to do things on 3A, but 3A is being paved from Situate to just past Beechwood Street, including the Beechwood Street light, the intersection, and those crossings will be redone with the lights and the push buttons and all that. If there is, and that's in the next, I'll say 18 months. If you're talking to the congressman and you ask him, maybe they can extend that a little further to Pond Street. I mean, it's going to stop, I think, 200 feet shy of Pond Street around Schofield Road. It's worth a shot as far as an ask to ask, can you add that to the project? It would all obviously need some design. It may delay the project a little bit, but it would probably solve a lot of the issues you're talking about with that particular intersection. And just on the
And
Thank you for mentioning that, Brian. We didn't know that, and that's really good to know. Thank you.
Julie,
Yeah,
since
so-
you have a connection over there with Senator O'Connor's office, is that something you could follow up on?
I absolutely can.
Great.
One other thing I just wanted to follow up, Brian, what you said in terms of the wetlands. So when you showed us a GIS mapping, it showed that it's actually the other side of the street where town owns property. So not the wetland side, but the other side, we have quite a large berth, I think, on that side for a possible sidewalk. So what I think it would be mostly about, I believe, would be about the abutters or those property owners there. There are a couple of fences there, but otherwise it's really just utility poles. So there are just some utility poles that need to be moved, or a sidewalk that goes around it one way, but it's a very wide road. And I do think it might be easier than at first glance. It may be easier since it's the other side of the road that we have more.
it's that garage that's there, and that's where it falls off, and then Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah, no,
so
I think you're right.
I'm
The
talking
town,
about 3A
you know,
to-
the road's off center towards the wetland, so you're right, it probably would be on the other side, but still would require, and I'll defer to Jay on this one, that it would require permitting with Concom. It's within
Yeah.
the buffer zone, and, you know,
Okay.
okay.
we're making impervious stuff. And just on the note of, you know, the sidewalk to nowhere one. So the intent of that was, and if you go through the master planning document, and a lot of the comments I've got, you know, that I don't think was mentioned here today was connectivity to the T station and being able to walk to and from the T station.
Mm.
And that piece of sidewalk that we did on Sawyer Street was connecting to 3A with the intent that DOT would then put sidewalks when they do their, you know, their design du jour is complete street sidewalks both sides, and that's what's going to happen on the south side of 3A. And when they get to the north side, that they would then create sidewalks that would connect that sidewalk all the way to the T station with crosswalks to Avalon, and then so you would have those connection points. And the town side connection point is the one we've already made. The other one that I've gotten a lot of comments on, and really there's been no design or anything beyond other than some discussion, was, you know, the Forest Ave area, North Main Street to the T station. And again, that
Mhm.
traverses a lot of wetlands and like some weird steep geography. So, but that's a highly walked area with,
Yeah,
you know, commuters. And so the intent with that sidewalk to nowhere was connecting Avalon to the schools, connecting to the shopping areas, and ultimately connecting to the T station and the King Street crossing, you know, going down towards Lily Pond.
Brian, is there, and I don't want to like nitpick or like come off like I'm like questioning how certain things got on this list versus others and stuff, but like, and I don't know how else to ask this, but like, so Smith and Cushing, that's kind of like off to the side. There's some houses back there. Totally get we want to connect that, but like in terms of like priority and safety and all of that, like how did those get allocated budget versus other ones that it really is like safety measures that are
Oh, this is just
at
for
risk?
paving. This is
Yeah,
just
this is
for
for
paving.
Oh, the street, this isn't sidewalk,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
paving the
over-
street.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is just for paving, and I do
Apologies.
know Mill Lane, or sorry, I do know Smith Place is really bad. I do.
I was thinking this was sidewalks. I take that, yeah, I know that they
I
don't have any.
apologize. Yeah, so I'm kind of
Sorry.
shifting gears a little bit,
Yeah.
going back and forth, which is, I know hopefully it's not confusing because we've got a sidewalk discussion, but we're also
Yeah.
this committee, although it's called the sidewalk committee, is also the road committee as well.
Yeah,
And they kind of go hand in hand, and
Yeah.
so sorry for that confusion.
totally get that. No, that's my fault. So I think
But-
one thing on that too, when we talk about like priorities and considerations and stuff, would be it like if we deem something we don't want to budget for a sidewalk, I think we should consider other traffic calming measures or safety measures, whether it's multi-use paths, things like that as well.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And to Ralph's point earlier, you know, our plan is to, when we're doing a road on this list we're looking at here, and there's a
Yeah.
sidewalk continuous with it, we're planning to do an overlay and bring that up to speed as far as connectivity. You know, there's savings with, you know, mobilization. Just doing a sidewalk alone and doing a street alone, you're paying for extra that,
Yeah.
if you do them together, you're saving.
Mhm.
So, Brian, let me ask you here. So, you know, in a perfect, it sounds like some of these projects might get done. I know we have to jump back to the Elm Street discussion. We have, it looks like, or the town has allocated almost $2.1 million for the roadway here, or roads for these 7 projects. Does the town have $2 million to do this?
So the values on this road plan is from the report that was sent to you, and those values are using DOT numbers, which are higher. So I'll call them really conservatively high numbers. So we're going to get better pricing than that. We're still firming up the pricing. We just had the AG, the Attorney General's office, rule on the contract last Friday. So we're going to award that hopefully this week and meet with the contractor next week to firm up our numbers. But right now we have about 1.1 for this current year, or we will have 1.1 when the Chapter 90 comes in.
And do you know how much you would actually be able to get done there?
Yeah, I think the road list we have here is, I'm confident we'll be able to do that with the 1.1.
Okay.
Brian, I have a question for you to piggyback on how Tori started her question. I'm just curious about the Pond Street extension, which I now understand is between King Street and the water treatment plant. It's 420 feet of a paved roadway that already exists. It's basically just a driveway from King Street to the water treatment plant, from what I understand. I use that every day to walk into the woods with my kids. And it's very well paved. My kids ride their bikes up and down it all the time. So it's from King, see it says ends at the dead end. And it says major rehabilitation for $112,000. And I'm just questioning that because I don't know, I don't see that that's necessary, and I'm wondering what I'm missing. It's a lovely.
Yeah, I think that is that's mislabeled. So roadway from 3A to King Street.
Okay, if it's 380 King Street, then Yahoo! I absolutely agree with it. And 112 makes sense. It's just that the number of feet, I think, would just need to be updated as well. The number of the length in feet, I know is more than I believe is more than 420 between King and 3A. And it wouldn't be a dead end. It would be a, because it's called an urban collector, and that little driveway between King and the water treatment plant, I wouldn't consider an urban collector. So I think you're right. I think that's an error, and I just wanted to point it out because it jumped out at me.
No, thank you.
Welcome.
So to jump back to the Elm Street discussion, it doesn't sound like we have a final plan. We had a great presentation by Mike at our last meeting, which I thought was very well done, was very well, the design looked great. I don't know what permitting process would need to be done by the town. Ralph brought this up, and I completely agree that the committee should weigh in on that. And I'm just looking at the timeframes, et cetera. Here it is almost May 1st. And in fact is like Elm Street a reality to actually get done in this FY23 with everything going on? I'm not saying not to do it, but at what point would we do that? And then to other points that have been made, if there are some low hanging fruit on there for 2024 that could be done in 2023, I think it's worthwhile exploring that. I think that the Elm Street, there's so much going on over there with so many different things. We're hearing the harbor project is not going to be done until sometime fall of 2024 at best. There's heavy machinery coming in and out. I know that someone said they can come in a different way. If you pave Elm and you pave Margin, then there's only one way to get in and get out. And so this just seems to be a really lot going on over there. But I really liked Mike's plan. I thought it was a great plan, personally. Ralph, I don't know if you want to talk more about that plan because you brought it up, and maybe focus here on Elm Street and see what it's going to take. And maybe Brian, you can chime in as well. What's it going to take for the town to buy into a plan like Mike had put together and move that forward?
Okay, I'll do this with full disclosure because I've spent so much time on this with Mike. I think the objectives were the important thing, and the objectives were, one is to provide better sidewalks. In fact, basically to meet the criteria that came out of the master plan. And the master plan included sidewalks, trees, green space, bicycle lanes, and then a couple of other things. So what Mike and I decided is, since nobody else was grabbing this one, and because Mike is a landscape architect and also just a supremely capable character for the town, it's really remarkable. He has spent hundreds and hundreds of hours trying to make this plan realistic and fit all of the criteria that people wanted. That came out of the master plan and are practical. One of which is, for heaven's sakes, we've got a major road through from the center of town to the harbor, which is a terrible mess as a result of the water department, which brings up an entirely different question about why the water department isn't paying for this. But that's for a future discussion on why we don't get these things done. But anyway, I think it's a project that is ready to go if in fact we can work with TL Edwards, if in fact they're the final contractor, get everybody a price so we know in fact what we're talking about. And then finally to go back through maybe at least one other committee, and I think that might be the Open Space Committee or other people who also have something to say about this. But I do think it's ready to go. And because it includes a 6 foot wide sidewalk on the south side, which reaches all the way to the almost a summer street. It is really part of an overall connectivity to the harbor. And it also includes crosswalks wherever there are buses and shortens up the crosswalk across Border Street from the Legion to the other side. So it has all these characteristics which people wanted. So I am a big advocate for doing something, even though I may have a conflict of having been part of the discussion on this one. But anyhow, I'm a strong advocate for doing it. I think it fulfills a lot of objectives and it beautifies everything from the downtown to the harbor and provides safety, sidewalks, trees, all the things that in fact everybody thinks were destroyed back in 1973 when they cut down all the elms. So that's my pitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you've checked off all of our boxes about connectivity to the harbor, the sailing club, et cetera, et cetera. It's about safety. So I think you've checked all the boxes in advance.
Well,
That's not deliberate, of course.
I think that the big question obviously is like around timing of it with everything going on down there. If it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's on the books for 2023.
Yes.
So is that something that, because given the fact nothing's going to be done down in the harbor area, is it a project we could potentially recommend goes in 2024? And if there's dollars allocated, reallocate those in 2023?
I think just to be realistic, I think that the harbor, once we get the oceanographic, the Woods Cole oceanographic report, I don't even know if we've got that yet, will require at least 2 more years of development. That will be a long process, I can tell you. Partly it'll be seawall increases, road changes. It's going to be a massive project. So if we postpone, it's not till 2024, it's 2025 or later. It's not trivial to do what people want to do. And I'm sure Oceanographic Institute is going to indicate, a foot or two of additional seawalls there. And so this is not an easy project to get done. So if you don't do Elm Street until then, we're putting that off for a very long time. I may be wrong on that, and maybe Brian should jump in on that and tell me if I'm right or wrong on it. But I think, and I'll point out one other
so
thing.
Elm Street is.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying Elm Street has been on the list. It was on the paving list for 2019, and then it was pushed off for the water work, and then it was pushed off again for design work. And so here we are, really condition-wise, supposed to have paved it probably 5 years ago, and that's the result of, that's why we're in the condition we're in right now. But if we do put it off for another 2 years, there's no way we can not do something on it, like at least an overlay or something temporary, and know that that temporary measure is going to be ripped up for a permanent measure. So I think just to keep forward traction, and we just got the announcement that we can award the bid. I talked to TL Edwards yesterday to set up a meeting for next week I still need to circle back with Mike and Ralph, but when I get a date sometime next week, I think the plan is to show them the plan, and then we'll probably have to digitize the plan, you know, spend maybe a couple grand of engineering money to digitize it and get a cost. And then with that information from them, we can really say, do we have the money to do it now? Do we need to, wait one season or
Yeah.
Mhm.
but we're still moving
Or
forward
even
as
phase it. Yeah.
quickly as we can.
And as you pointed out, Brian, it sounded like we have the town has $1.1 million to do that. If the Elm Street project comes in at 850,000, then we're going backwards and taking off projects that are already slated to be done this year, as opposed to taking projects from 2024, moving them up, and then we're actually taking a 2023 project and pushing that back to 2024, if in fact it went forward.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, we really, hopefully the next meeting or the following week meeting will have some firmer costs on our road list. But right
Yeah.
now, the bids came in, some of the items were 50 to 70% higher than the previous. So we're looking at a pretty big price hike on paving in general. So I still think we'll be under those DOT values, but we're going to be much higher than we were in the past couple of years.
When do you think you'll have final numbers on this 2023 plan, Brian? I'm assuming you're going to, so you said you're going to do a walkthrough with the contractor. Are you going to look at the 2023 and 2024 plans, or what's the plan to get exact costs?
Yeah, 2023 Elm Street, and there's a couple of roads, Church Street and the connection right before Situate there. That took a really bad beating this past winter, and so we're gonna look at that as well, at least pricing out. But yeah, 2023 is the focus. 2024 we'll talk about. But again, the numbers. Contractors don't want to go out and measure every road and price every road if you're going to say, well, thanks, we're not doing it right now. So I think that, we really need a list that we're going to do this season. They want to jump on it. We're sharing this contractor with 11 other communities. So we can't spin his wheels too much, doing work that we're not going to do.
Okay. So if we had a meeting 2 weeks from today, do you think you would have some numbers?
I'll have some numbers probably on the, I don't know if Elm Street, I'm pretty sure that won't be costed out, but,
Right.
Margin, Smith.
Yeah.
Some of the other roads.
And so what other town boards, or does a select board need to be on board with any of these decisions for paving?
No, this is our paving list. They've reviewed it. They've, they were the ones who initiated that study.
Okay.
So we're ready to pave once we make sure that our appropriations and funding are within the guidelines, and these are our roads.
Okay. All right. Just looking at the clock here, 12:35. Anybody have any questions on the paving plan? Julie, go ahead.
I just noticed right before you took it down in 2022, Pond Street between 3A and King is already listed. I'm so sorry. I didn't notice that. So it's already listed under 2022. And this really may not be possible, but I'd just like to voice that it would be so fabulous if it could be widened, or if there could be some sort of an area to the side where kids could walk, so that our half of town could walk to the schools and could walk to the other half of town. It's such a prime opportunity to put a walking area where it's missing right now on Pond between 3A and King. And I just wanted to voice that concern one more time.
Yeah, I completely, I get it. I agree with you. Just designing the sidewalk or expanding any surface area, and Jay can tell you the figures more than me, but expanding it more than 500 square feet or something like that, then we need to go to Concom review And moving utility poles is not, it does take a lot of time. It takes engineering effort from third-party utilities, National Grid, Verizon. And you'll look at some of the double poles around town that we've been trying to get rid of for months and in some cases a couple of years. It's not very quick in moving utility poles, but it needs to be designed. The select board needs to give grants of locations for anything moving outside of the, within a foot of the existing pole. So it's a process, but worthwhile.
Okay.
Is that one, like, it's 2022, is it still on plan or did it get canceled off since?
Everything on here is still on the list.
Okay.
So it's, at this point, it's just going to be repaved and that's it, right? It'll just, won't have any potholes anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any, and again, I'll defer to you guys. I don't think anybody just wants to repave it in its current configuration. That's not what I'm hearing. Is that accurate?
Well, I think that the focus should be if a road's going to be repaved and there's an opportunity for the sidewalk and it meets our criteria, then absolutely, then we should go down that road. Now, you mentioned a couple of times, Brian and I, the permitting process, if there are wetlands in the area, and I served on that committee for 8 years, and that's a tough group. When you start like the Sawyer Street, the sidewalk, and I'll rephrase the sidewalk to nowhere to say the sidewalk that's rarely used. And from the first Concom meeting, I think it was probably 5 or even 6 months until that project was actually approved. It didn't pass the first time, it didn't pass the second time. And there was some that didn't even want that sidewalk to ever to go in due to the taking down of the trees and the runoff of the sidewalk into the wetland and the gully and the road work there. So, even though there's a road that goes right down there, when you start to encroach and get very close and right up against literally the edge of the wetlands, that raises a lot of flags, and that's a costly measure. There's engineering services that are involved in that, that again, very costly. And it's time consuming. So it's not just a one and done in front of that committee, that's for sure. And as you know, Brian, they're asking for pervious asphalt, which is actually a special asphalt where if you take you should be able to take a 5-gallon bucket of water, pour it on the asphalt, and it immediately is gone, as opposed to a roadway where as sheet flow, it actually runs off. So it's a different form of asphalt. It's a different design. So it's not always that easy when you're right up against wetlands.
Yeah, and if I could just make a comment on that, so the Sawyer Street sidewalk, you're right, that was a very expensive sidewalk because of the pervious requirements there. And I would prefer to do another type of catchment or treatment rather than doing the pervious sidewalk, just because the cost alone, on last contract, it was $90 a ton for regular bituminous. It was $240 for the pervious type asphalt. You also have to excavate down like 2 feet. It's got this collection pipe in there and then you have a filter bed up to that point. So it's a lot of work. I mean, I would prefer, and I'll just plant the bug in Jay's ear, but I would prefer to have a regular pervious service that drains to, a grit chamber, a leaching facility, which is easier to maintain long-term. It's a lower cost installation. And it's not like something that, if I leave, everyone else leaves, people might forget that's a pervious sidewalk that needs to get vacuumed every year, and then it just becomes impervious when it gets filled up with stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with you completely.
Just a quick one. In order to get any project done, it usually requires engineering. And I wonder, Brian, whether or not we would want to set aside some money to really take a serious look at that stretch of road between 3A or Pond Street, between 3A and King, just again, put aside some engineering, because without that, we will talk this one through without any basis for a decision. So we need a basis for a decision as I see this one. And in this one's, I think, on everyone's priority list, as far as I can tell, and would wonder if we couldn't put some engineering money behind it. So that's the question.
Yeah, and just a ballpark engineering cost, you know, if you want to be conservative, again, you do 8 to 10% of the construction value.
Okay.
If you're going to do a full survey and full-blown engineering. And if you look at the road list, this was in kind of bad shape, and you look at the road report and then the sidewalk report, this also kind of ranked high on a connectivity type measure.
What are the steps that we have to take to, like, so this committee is going to put together recommendations in terms of, you know, these are the considerations that should be taken into putting sidewalks into places, but like, how do we actually move anything forward and have it happen?
So, I mean, my recommendation is you come up with the list of what you want to do. You present that as the recommendations to the select board. Then we put a dollar figure to them, and you go to the next town meeting for an appropriation for the engineering of it, and then subsequent or engineering and construction of it, and then we do the work. Engineering, permitting, and construction. One other thing that I don't think we talked about is, you know, it's fine to do roads and sidewalks that are continuous with it, but if you're creating a brand new sidewalk on a road that didn't have a sidewalk before, you may run into resistance on the residents that immediately front that.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
getting like a resident buy-in or some sort of, I don't know, resident meeting, you know, if you put a sidewalk all the way down the coast, Jerusalem Road, Atlantic, I guarantee you there would be people who would oppose it because they may not want people just walking in front of their house all day.
Right.
And in other parts of town as well.
So I guess another question, like, let's use Pond Street as an example. You're going to be paving that in the near future. It sounds like from this 2022 list, right? Us getting in front of the town, going through that is a year-long process about, right? To get actually any sort of movement going on this. All of these streets are going to get paved. If they have a sidewalk, you're going to be recovering those sidewalks. If they don't have a sidewalk, it doesn't matter. There's no consideration of putting a sidewalk in. Is that correct?
No, I think, you know, Pond Street between 3A and King Street, you know, if that could last a couple of years if it took us the process to engineering and design to put a sidewalk in there. You know, it wouldn't be the best road in town, but, you know, Margin Street can't wait. Elm Street can't wait, just based on condition. There are some other ones that are really, and they're not navigable or drivable. So I think we could go through that process, and the process is, you know, I wouldn't say it's not getting anything done. It's a lot of work to get the engineering done and all that stuff. So it's, you know, before the physical work happens. The DOT project for Route 3A from Situate up past Beechwood, that's been in design for 10 years to get to the point where we're about to bid it, or the DOT is going to bid it in January, I think. Next year.
Yeah. As we're all sitting here listening and shaking our head and going back and forth and looking at the plan, thinking, you know, nothing is going to happen overnight here. It sounds like the 2023 plan is, you know, mainly in place. There are some question marks, but I think that the sooner that this committee can come up with a final report and present that to the select board and come up with some appropriations, we'll be in much better shape. And that's why I go back to the setting of the criteria. I mean, in my view, I could just look at this TEC paving report and I'll share it briefly here, because the select board and the town citizens are going to say, well, why did you choose that road? You know, why did you choose that road? So the setting of the criteria is really, in my view, it is huge, so we can justify this. Now, I go back and look at this list here, and I go back to this PCI number of 1 to 10. And I'll just keep hoppering on this, and I go back to Mill Lane, and that's a 6. The 6 is out. I wouldn't say it's outstanding, but it's in decent shape. Smith Place is a 3. If anybody's ever been down over Smith Place, which actually serves a special needs school at the end. I don't know if anybody's actually been over to Smith Place, which is another thing. You know, what does the road actually serve? There is a handicap vans going up and down that road, unfortunately, every single day to get to that school. It's almost like you need four-wheel drive. So, you know, I look at that and say, if that's a 3, then wow, I don't even want to see what a number 2 is or some other 3s. So looking at this list, you know, one would say without having any criteria, well, why don't we just tackle all the 3s and 3.5s? And if it's a 5 or a 6, then that drops all the way down. And then looking at Beechwood, well, hell, we got 2s and 3s on Beechwood. Why don't we push the Beechwood ones up 2026 up to 2024? So coming up with criteria, the sooner the better, in my view, is in getting in front of the select board is really, you know, finalizing this report, and then maybe perhaps once we finalize the criteria, let's dive into this actual paving report and prioritize and shape the future, because that's what this committee's here for, right? We're trying to shape the future of the paving. We can't do anything for 2023. Okay, that's fine. But let's try and shape 24, 25, and 26. That's how I look at this.
And you're right, Jay. We are trying to do worst first, generally on that list. It kind of backed up with that report with the PCI index.
Yeah. Are you so with that PCI report? I know I think Frank had actually asked for some spreadsheets. I don't know if that was ever was available at all anywhere. I don't know if anybody ever dug those up anywhere, but so that like 7 or 8 year plan there, you know, looking at that PCI number, it didn't seem like the PCI number carried a lot of weight for some of them. And I know.
So, you know, our paving plan for years now has been kind of a 20-year paving plan. And again, it's generally a 20-year paving plan. So if a road gets paved every 20 years, we're in decent shape. Obviously, your minor collectors or, you know, your major collectors need it more frequently, and your dead end streets or minor roads need it less frequently. So that's the general framework as far as our 37 miles of public road in town is. Do 37 miles within 20 years and prioritize around that. So we try to do 1.5 to 2 miles a year. And then this most recent condition report kind of massaged that a little bit. But some of these are on the list, as they have been for a while, because of, you know, that they hadn't been paved in a long time.
Okay. And I think obviously, as you know, funding has a lot to do with this. And one of the charges here for this committee, which I don't know how we do that, pull a rabbit out of our hat here, but come up with funding sources. I mean,
everything comes down to money. Yeah, everything comes down to money. So whatever decisions are made or whatever gets put on a list, we need to put a dollar figure on it and make a town meeting article and go for the funding.
Yeah. So if Brian, if in fact there are, and I know, you know, no contractor wants to come out and measure roadways for the sake of measuring roadways, but if I could put a plug in here to get some of those 2024 roads, some rough numbers from the contractor, I think that'd be really helpful, because they're just going to come back again in the fall, and as you mentioned earlier, we have to let residents know in the fall what's coming up for the next upcoming summer. You've got to make sure there's no water lines, no sewer lines. The road isn't going to get dug up. So in my view, you know, now's the time to really start looking at 2024 and getting some rough numbers. And is that doable, you know, with the 1.5 or whatever the cost figure that was associated with it? Yeah, 1.5. I know hopefully those numbers come down, but can we get some rough numbers on 2024 roads?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. So we're going to be talking with them about them. We'll get some numbers, but you bring up another good point is, you know, this paving list is, it's rough, but we do send it to all the utilities, National Grid, and say, if, you know, the water department, the sewer department, if there is any road work to be done in here, let's get it planned and let's get it paved. Or, you know, to get your work done as soon as possible before we get in there. And sometimes we don't get responses in a timely manner, or in the case of Pond Street, we paved Pond Street and then they came in, a lot of people added generators, and the load in town had changed where there were pressure problems on the far side of town. So they needed to increase the size after we had paved, which is why Pond Street got dug up. So that, those things happen, but we try to coordinate with the utilities so they get their work done 2 or 3 years ahead of ours.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like for our next meeting, which I'd like to schedule in a little bit here. Let me get my calendar out. That you might have some numbers for us, Brian, potentially. So if I said, how does this time frame work? And I know, I want to put a stop here at 1 o'clock. It's like probably most of you are working today and value all of your time. Does this time frame work like 11:30 to 1 o'clock if we put a hard stop at 1 o'clock and maybe finish up a little earlier? And does Tuesday work for this group?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Okay. Why don't we plan on having the next meeting on May, I think it's May 9th. And then the one just for time's sake, so it'll be like May 9th and May 23rd would be the next 2 meetings. And we'll start them at 11:30 and try and do a hard stop at 1 o'clock. And Brian, again, hopefully, if not by the 9th, we'll have some more solid numbers. I hope by the 23rd from some of the contractors. I know they just got the award and they'll be running around a little bit.
Right. So just so you know, so my intent is firm up the numbers and schedule the contractors. So those roads on the 2023 lists, if I don't get on there, they're moving forward, with the exception of Elm Street. And just so that we can get on the list and get them scheduled, so we don't lose the paving year.
So is everything besides Elm Street? I mean, if they said we'll do it tomorrow for nothing, you'd say, okay, do it tomorrow for nothing, right? Everything besides Elm Street, is that like you've got the green light for that all?
Yeah, we're ready to go. I mean, if you walked Margin or drove Margin in Atlantic, it's terrible. And just, things within the marshes too, we're also going to be, we're doing an underlayment so that the road will float and not break up as much over the next 20 years.
Yeah. Now, again, I'll just throw this out there because people have, I've heard this over and over, with respect to like the margin, and maybe not so much margin because it's coming in from the backside, but with all of the construction going on with the harbor, that just to kind of tread lightly around the paving and the sidewalks over there, if in fact all that construction is still going to be going on. So it's a common theme that I keep hearing over and over across town.
Yeah, and I've been talking with John Hallen about it. I mean, if you go down there, you can see their construction fence is taking up the sidewalk that's around the site. So
yeah. Okay.
Definitely coordinate when we get there.
All right.
Hey, Jay, you mentioned funding earlier. I just wanted to ask Brian and others in the group, are you aware of any federal grants or state grants related to either complete streets or safe routes to school that we as a committee could apply for on behalf of the town, could apply for in order to supplement the sidewalks that we're talking about for connecting to schools in town?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. There is, so we have shared streets, which is, we got a grant to fund that Sawyer Street sidewalk. We had applied for that same stretch of sidewalk with safe routes to school and were rejected a couple of times. But yeah, safe routes to school is out there. Shared streets, and then I think, just petitioning DOT on any kind of sidewalks on 3A. They have programs within their DOT themselves that can fund things.
Did we ever put Pond Street in for safe routes to school, or was it just focused on Sawyer?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Did the town ever apply for safe routes to school grant on Pond Street, or was it just for Sawyer to the elementary school?
So Pond Street, we applied for the connection of there's like I think Ralph mentioned earlier, there's a connection to Pond Street from the piece that comes down from Alumni Stadium that was never built, I think probably for permitting reasons or whatever, but we applied for that. We applied for Sawyer Street and we didn't receive any of them.
So nothing for Pond Street, Tori. So this would be a new thing for us that I think would be worthwhile us looking into, because it connects, again, a whole half of town to the schools, which is really critical, I think.
Yeah, so the section we've talked about, that Pond Street extension, we did not apply for. It was just for the piece in front of the school to connect to Pond Street.
And Pond Street extension, I just want to clarify, is really just I don't think what we're talking about, because that's just the driveway to the water treatment plant. I think we're talking about actual Pond Street between 3A and King. And I don't know what to call it. I know it sort of makes sense to call it extension because it's extending beyond 3A. But on that report, Pond Street extension is described as just that 425 feet between King and the water treatment plant, which is just a driveway. I think that might be what they're calling an extension.
You're correct.
Yeah.
Oh.
And Julie brought up a good point about any local, state, or federal funding. I know in my position, we're handing out hundreds of millions of dollars for wastewater and drinking water treatment plants, but with the bipartisan infrastructure law, which we call the BIL law, BIL, but I don't know of any piece on roadways, but it's certainly something I'm going to dive into, because again, there's tens of hundreds of millions of dollars for infrastructure being passed around by the federal government right now. So if anybody knows of any other funding sources, by all means, I mean, that would be wonderful. All right. Anything else we missed here? Carol, I hope you took great notes. We're not looking for anything, a book reports here, but just hitting some of the highlights here, really focusing in on the criteria. I think we came up with about 5 or 6 of them. If there are any others that people can think of, just shoot me an email. And,
Okay.
I think next meeting we'll go back and focus in and narrow that, really kind of firm up in my view, firm up the criteria for setting of the roadways, and then focusing in on the prioritization and looking at that list. And hopefully Brian has some numbers back from the contractors by then to see what the reality is of 2023, what we can get done, if there's any leftover money, etc. And then kind of look at shaping the future with 2024, 25, and 26. Did I leave anything out there, or anybody have any other additional comments?
Just one thing I want to add to the list, and we don't have to get into it at all because I know we're at the end of time here, is just crosswalks in general as a part of the list of prioritization, or working them in. Just on my little walking route from our house, there's like 8 places where there should be a crosswalk. The sidewalk ends, there's a sidewalk on the other side of the street, and there's no crosswalk. And I don't know what kind of approvals it takes to put a crosswalk in, or I assume they're not very expensive, but I think that's something to look at.
Is that just like painting, Frank?
Yeah, literally just the lines and maybe a sign on either side that says this is a crosswalk, so people know to look for people. But yeah, as simple as that. Just dead end sidewalks where you need to cross the street. You have no choice, but there's no lines on the road.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I'll turn to Brian here to see, how that all fits in, if that fits in under, regular DPW budget, or, roadways, etc., or the relining. I know there are other areas of town where you're actually, while you're out there, when you're marking parking spots, like down by Black Rock Beach and other parts of town where there's dedicated lines for individual parking spots, if we could put some crosswalks in there.
Yeah, so the issue, I mean, paint is cheap. We could paint anything anywhere, but we can't just paint crosswalks without consideration of the ADA requirements on either side. So you need to have, the proper slope, the tread mats, and the transition to the sidewalk, wherever you put those. And any change in roadway is under the purview of the select board. So it'd probably be, if we want to put a crosswalk where there's never been one before, we'd need to make sure we have it designed right, and then get select board approval, and then funding.
Okay.
How about
What
if there were
about-
no sidewalks in place at all? There's no sidewalk,
Yeah.
but there's just, connecting, like around Milliken Field, for instance, where we say, you know what, we should really have a crosswalk here at Milliken Field.
Yeah,
Certain
so I
times.
mean, you get into points where, it'd be great to have a crosswalk, but if you paint a crosswalk and wherever it dumps you on either side, if it's not a safe transition, the town takes on liability for creating an unsafe condition. And I don't know the area exactly what you're talking about, but I have gotten a lot of requests like on Elm Street to create a crosswalk in the middle, but it requires, we have to drop the curbing, you have to get the tread mats correctly. And then obviously that ties into why would we spend that money if we're going to redesign it here? So,
Yeah.
Brian, what about like if you guys are going to go ahead and pave Pond Street, right, from that plan, and we don't have, like, sidewalk isn't part of that plan right now, could you put a multi-use path over there on one side there that actually allows them, from a painting standpoint, allows kids to walk home safely from school?
So you need 12-foot travel lanes for the car, and then you ideally need a 6-foot, a 6-foot section to walk in for shared use. So you're talking 24, you're like 30 feet. I don't know that we have 30 feet there, but it's kind of what you would need. So again, you can't just paint. You could do sharrows, which are like, you see like bicycles with the double arrow there, shared roads, but you can't put pedestrians on a trail, like a vehicular travel lane, without incurring liability with just paint.
That's where they are now. We just don't have the liability because parents are taking on the liability of having their children walk.
We could paint some people on the side of the road, but it doesn't make them safer. I mean, it just.
I know.
Yeah. Well, it might make them more aware, to Ralph's point earlier about Sandy Beach, when you take out 12 feet of road and then you add another 6 feet, that's 18 feet. Parts of that road are only 18 feet wide. So it now becomes like a one-way over there. And same thing down here with Jerusalem Road. But I think it's certainly something to look at as a small safety measure. At least if you're driving down the road, you see them in downtown Boston all the time, where you have the bike paths, but the car's still actually in the bike path.
Yeah.
But at least you're mentally, hopefully, made aware that, there is a bike path, and I need to be cognizant of at least bikers and or walkers in the area. Not that it's going to make them any safer, but mentally, you think you're a little safer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're up a couple minutes after 1 o'clock, and I know we could probably go on for a while here, but why don't we call it an afternoon, and we'll get another meeting going for May 9th and May 23rd if people want to mark their calendar at 11:30. I appreciate everybody's time. If you come up with any other criteria or anything else that you want to kick around, just send it to me directly, so we don't violate any open meeting laws here with distribution to the whole group, and we'll get it on we'll get it on the agenda for next time. All right, everybody. Appreciate your time. All those in motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.